Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start off today by looking at the all hazards weather map pretty early this morning because we're dealing with some pretty significant contrast in temperatures across the country. It's quite cold this morning in parts of the kind of the eastern side of the Corn Belt, getting over to the Appalachian Mountains and then into the Northeast, and also quite cold in the west. But we're really building quite a bit of warmth into the midsection of the country ahead of this severe weather event. As you take a look at the early morning temperatures, you can see the warm sector opening up, and we do know that there is Gulf moisture pulled into this, but we're quite cold on either side, which is what's going to set us up with a very active weekend. It does help that we have some rather deep features in the flow of the atmosphere. So I'm going to, instead of showing you just the normal satellite view that I do, we're going to look at water vapor, upper level water vapor. It's a good tracer of atmospheric motion here. And it's fascinating. We've got a big, deep wave that's coming into parts of the Northwest, really getting into more British Columbia. We have our lead wave here. There's another wave that's leaving. Watch out of parts of Texas later. It's going to show up right about here. And what's going to end up occurring here is as one low goes through, it's going to leave a front on which this next low is going to ride through. And that's going to be the trigger for this severe weather risk that we're going to be seeing in parts of the Midwest and Mid-South. Still, Bermuda High is gone. That story has not changed. But as you know, what we've been talking about now for a couple of weeks, we're watching this very energetic time period in the North Pacific with a jet extension just pushing systems across, and we're going to see where those end up going. So the current one that we're going to keep an eye on here, I'm going to go up to about 850 millibars. That's about a mile above our heads, and we're going to be looking for that low-level jet for the severe weather setup as we work our way through Friday into Saturday. And as it stands, getting into Saturday night, Saturday afternoon to Saturday evening, you can see the strength of these winds in this area, and they're getting faster in the low levels by the time we get into the overnight hours. And so the risk area from where that low-level jet will be, which is, again, going to help our storms kind of jump off their boundaries, give us better chances for rotation, is going to just increase the severe weather threat. So that is the first component of what we're going to diagnose today. You know that the stability, or I should say the instability of this setup is not high. So if there's going to be storms, we're going to be relying on strong forcing and high shear to get air to rise quickly and then separate itself from separate the downdrafts from the updrafts so the storms can live. But as this trough comes through, this is the first significant rainfall chance in this area. But have a look at this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 low-level, low-pressure systems. And I'm just going to show you this. As we go out there through the weekend into next week, look what the Pacific just keeps delivering. I mean, we're going to watch early next week another low go through the Great Lakes. We have another deep low in the Gulf of Alaska. And as these push through, they just keep showing up. And this is a huge signal for the western United States in terms of moisture as we work our way through the next 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, they just keep coming. These systems do. And they will eject into the midsection of the country. The long story short, expect a volatile temperature pattern if you're east of the Rocky Mountains. Expect better and better chances of rainfall if you're east of the Rocky Mountains. Expect snow west. Expect heavy rain in the west out of this setup. And what I'm concerned about is where these ridges keep forming and what's going on in parts of the southeast. Are we able to get some of the moisture into that area? So with that as a setup today, I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go with this forecast video. We're going to look more in depth at the severe weather, look at the precipitation out of it. And then at the end of this, after I kind of show you where I think this pattern is going to go with both precip and temperature over the next couple of weeks, I've got a lot to say about what I think the new NOAA winter forecast may mean. And I'm specifically going to focus on a contrast between the south and the north, knowing that I think this is going to be a winter in the west that we start to break drought issues. All right. So I that's my setup right now, what I'm thinking. I know Matt yesterday kind of made a point that if we get this T&H pattern that just drops brutally cold air into the Great Lakes, it tends to leave California out of the mix. Now, we talk about this every day. Andrew, Matt, and I, we're not settled on anything. And my thought process is, given the changes in the North Pacific, I think that the West is going to see better chances. It's not going to be constant throughout winter, but better chances for breaking their drought. But back to the story that's right here at hand now. This is our Storm Prediction Center maps. You got day 1, which is today on Friday. There's Saturday. We'll take a closer look at that. And then Sunday. The system going across is going to begin to increase the threat of severe weather, and it's also going to increase the threat of very heavy rains. And you can see that this hits like parts of the Ozarks and it gets up into southern Illinois, but there's a broader area in the Midwest where we see chances for some heavy rains. Now, if you take a look at the day 2 map, which is Saturday's map, according to the Storm Prediction Center, large area of slight risk. They identified this, by the way, 7 days in advance, which is fantastic work by them. The tornado threat up to 5% in this area, and I do imagine that we will later today, tomorrow on Saturday, be dealing with isolated tornadic events down here, given the shear that we do see in the atmosphere. The wind threat, it's a broad area, 15% of straight line wind damage. These would be winds greater than 60 miles an hour. And if you have a look here at the hail threat, it's primarily back farther to the west, stretching from southern Missouri through parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Now, as this system takes shape today, all right, getting into tomorrow, it's actually going to be the link up between a front that's lingering here and that low. Remember, I labeled out 4 or 5 of them. It's the low that's to the south that's going to ride on this boundary, fed on its own moisture here, produced by this high pressure cell that's in the southeast. Now, why I called it its own moisture is because it is the development of this trough and the resulting high pressure down, on this side of it that's going to open up the Gulf to the moisture transport. The Bermuda High is still way over here. Okay, that's so this is not the contributor to this. This is kind of a dynamically forced high pressure cell due to the deeper wave coming through the northern plains of the United States. You can see that wave better. This is the one we're going to be watching most carefully. That's the short wave rounding the base of the trough, and it's going to ride a boundary right in through here and initiate the risk of very heavy rain and severe storms. But take a look at the jet stream level flow. When you see these little short waves like this coming through rather than the big loopy ones that can often happen, this just says prepare for an active setup, prepare for the flow to dive and then exit. That is a return of jet stream flow, which we've not seen, honestly, in months. And this is kind of the setup we've been trying to build up to in the last few weeks of our discussions. So I'm going to pick up here this morning with a high-resolution rapid refresh model, and it is showing you radar reflectivity. And as we play through, this is getting through the middle of the day today, we are going to watch the main front begin to set up right here. All right. So that's by this afternoon and this evening. That's where you have your risk of some thunderstorms. But the low we're talking about is the one that's taking shape down here, which you can't quite see yet, early on Saturday morning. And that is the frontal boundary that it's going to ride. Now, you're keeping an eye on this just to see where the rainfall is going to be. And by the way, this is the next big wave behind it, all right, that's going to dig into this system. And we'll show you more about that one in a second. But there it goes. There's the low, and it's going to start to take shape, but the high-resolution model only runs out 36 hours. And so here we are with the new low forming. That is the front it's going to ride on, and there's this big wave pushing in on the back side of it before we get to the next system in the west. So, oops, sorry about that. That is, let's go here. That's Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock Central Time. I'm going to pick this up with the NAM, and they look pretty close in where they landed at Saturday afternoon. So now you can see the low forming. It's going to ride that front, and then you see the afternoon and evening, the rebuilding of thunderstorms along that boundary as another cold front comes pushing in from the north. It just came through the northern plains into the upper Midwest. And this is delivering very heavy rainfall into parts of Arkansas and Missouri and Illinois and Indiana. And that's the low moving through. It's going to have very strong winds with it. It curls up over the Great Lakes, spreads its rain over toward the Appalachian Mountains, getting through the eastern Corn Belt, sharp temperature change on the backside. And man, if this was the middle of winter, we'd be talking about heavy, heavy snows here, but we're not cold enough for that, so that's not going to be the issue. Now, meanwhile, look at the northwest. That next low, we saw it here. It's this guy right there, is diving into the northwest. Where was I? There we are. And we can see the moisture coming into Washington, into Oregon, into northern Idaho, and getting into Montana. We're going to see where this low takes us in just a few moments. But that kind of just, that's the idea through the weekend on what we're expecting. And this is, of course, going to move into the northeast. As I mentioned, strong winds around it. Let's just go have a look at what the models are predicting. That'll take us all the way out through the weekend into Monday. So we have the initial setup with stronger winds. They're going to get really strong through the eastern Corn Belt up through this side of Canada. The second system is the one that comes through and drives in some very strong winds into the plains. We've seen these winds really start to ratchet their way up as of late. And if I just play this all the way out, you're just going to take note that with the active pattern, there's a broad area of the United States that's going to be seeing strong winds, but this is an area of concern for me, which is why I'm going to hit on this in the long range later. Why? What is not happening across the southeast to revive moisture in that area? To show you the total amount of precip, that front in the newest forecast has really begun to increase the rainfall totals in through here. And we have from southern Missouri through eastern Illinois, through most of Indiana and Michigan, a chance of 1 to 3 inches of rainfall along this evolving boundary with the secondary low riding up on that boundary. Now, we know we're going to be drier and windier on the backside. We know the west, this is just the beginning of what's going to be happening in the west. But this area down through here just continues to show up on renting a lot of space in my head as some sort of signal as we get into winter. So I'll come back to that in a second, but you can see that it is drier. Now, we know where we've already been dry, okay? So that's not to ignore those places. I'm talking about Texas, for example. But we just need to have a look at how this pattern evolves to see if we can break some of that. Because for the last 60 days, where the rain's coming through now, this area has been extremely dry. The dryness is going to continue here for a while, but I'm curious as to how this develops. That's 60 days looking at the moisture. Now, we know that this is going to be revived. Just wait until you see how much moisture is coming into the northwest. And I do think that these systems help to revive more moisture into parts of the northeast. But if you just take a look at the near term, this is the last 2 weeks. Right where that heaviest rain is coming through, it has not rained in 2 weeks. So that's why we're keeping a close eye on this corridor here, okay? Now, I'll talk in a moment about how long I think this is going to last, but I wanted you to see where this near-term system is coming through. And again, it's an issue of drought. We saw the drought monitor ratchet up another % in the newest update, and we see that corridor through which that rain is expected to move is very, very dry, and we need to get some moisture in place there. This is Saturday, folks, so some of you that are watching that are actively harvesting, we're down to 24 hours until we're raining here. So let's get this understood so we can make some progress going forward. All right. Okay, from here, I do want to show you the models. There's the GFS on the left, European on the right. Let's just play it out. Okay, so here's the system. The models right there. There's the secondary low Saturday evening. It rides right over the front. See it? So you have 2 chances of moisture. The first front comes through. There's the first front. And then you have the low that rides up. There goes the second one. And you can see both models are putting down pretty heavy rain from the mid-south to the midwest. Meanwhile, look at the west. Next system comes through. It's a Rocky Mountain snowmaker. And while that's happening, this low is curling its way up on Sunday night into Monday morning into the northeast. And then that low that came through here eventually starts to spin itself up over the Great Lakes by Tuesday of next week. There it goes, right there. Now, you saw all the waves stacked up, though. So what I'm going to show you is getting past Tuesday into Wednesday when that low moves into the northeast. Here it comes. Watch the west. Large frontal boundary there by next Friday. Saturday, deep coastal low showing up in both models. The European is much deeper. But I think this is the first, or not the first, but the next in a sequence of deep lows that are going to be coming into the western United States. Now, I know I'm out there pretty far in the forecast, but look at the model consistency. That's pretty well resolved by these 2 models, okay? So there's going to be some snow with this. Take a look. This is the first round. That's through Monday. So we're talking mainly up in British Columbia, the Northern Rockies here. Then you get out there past this, and when those lows start to hit late next week, so here we are, there's Thursday. Look at the coastal ranges here in British Columbia. That's just by next Thursday. And then you go into next weekend, and it starts to really add up for the western United States. Now, let's just take this back to total precipitation, look at some probabilities. Over the next 10 days, who has the highest probability of 1 inch? And with our current system, it runs right through here and then opens up into a broader part of Canada and the Northeast. But again, you can see this drier area here. You also take note that the farther out you go in the forecast, the more the western United States sees these low pressure systems, and as a result, the precipitation goes up. What about the chances for 2 inches? Sorry, let's go back to that 0Z run, take you out 10 days. There we go. That's the chances of 2 inches. And if there's some really, really wet spots, they're primarily going to be along the west coast here in the Pacific Northwest. On the drier side of it, all right, Texas, the stretch that goes right through the plains here. And again, there, we're running the risk of being drier. And after what had been some extremely wet conditions, including severe weather in parts of the southwest over the last 5 to 7 days, we're now looking at much drier conditions returning. But again, take a look at the southeast. That seems to be just an area that has to be monitored carefully going forward for the risk of continued drought development. I think it gets farther into the, into the coastal parts of the South as well. All right. Okay, from there, I just want to make this point again. Look at the sequence of waves moving through. And look at the cutoff low that's going into California. Now, this is next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But there are deep lows rolling through, and this has been extremely well forecast for, 10 days now? We've seen this, and it's there. And it's going to send the central U.S. on a wild ride with temperatures, but it's going to keep mostly the West cool, very wet. And then as we get later into the time period, that's an interesting look right there. This is on like the 28th. There's another low sneaking through the midsection of the country. That one's heading up toward Halloween. And the question will be, what does it do to, that Friday Halloween? Is it already all the way through, and do the temperatures rebound, or where does it really set itself up? So we'll keep an eye on that. But the week 2 forecast models, just look at the West. Hit hard in every model. See that? But these systems are expected to go through. So the AI and the ECMWF, so here's the AI, here's the European ensemble, wetter. Even the GFS is a little bit wetter than average. I want to show you one more kind of complement to this and just show you the NOAA all hazards maps that go out into week 2. So as we mentioned, the West taking the brunt of all of those waves coming across the Pacific. There's now a high risk in Northern California and this part of Oregon, southwestern Oregon, of heavy precipitation October 24th through the 30th. On the snow side of it, once you get up to high elevation, so the Klamath Mountains, getting up to the Cascades, and then the Rockies, the risk is increasing for heavy snows. Again, this is week 2, the 24th through the 30th. And in terms of winds, with each system coming through, they're expected to not only push their strong winds into the west, but also coming off the mountains into the central United States, we're expecting strong winds as well. And finally, with this pattern showing, remember I mentioned that low coming through the 20th, 29th, there's the risk of dropping the temperatures off here, once we get out there toward the very end of the month. Now, back to this dryness in the south, okay? I'm thinking about if anything in the tropics could possibly spark things. And you know that we've been discussing this next wave, which the National Hurricane Center has given a 30% chance of developing once it gets into the Caribbean. But we've been talking about, in fact, Matt, what did Matt call it yesterday? Like the Caribbean death zone or something, I don't know. But, it's just an unfavorable region. If we look at the latest forecast, now this is the European ensemble, let's let it restart here. There's the low we're talking about. It gets into the Caribbean. I just don't see any remarkable development of it. And I also don't see it getting up into the Gulf. And the Gulf has been a massive void of tropical systems this year. And there's a lot of reasons for why. One of the things I'm thinking hard about, though, is this one. If you look at the wind shear in the Gulf, once we got through August, which was way below average, that would have been a key indicator for getting tropical systems into the Gulf. But in the heart of the hurricane season, the shear came up a big way in September. Now, the other problem here, as we mentioned, was the Bermuda High was gone. Nothing to push these systems in, so they all curled out to open ocean. But I wanted you to see that increase in wind shear in the Gulf when we had just no storms that got in there. The shear was actually pushing them across Mexico and Central America into the East Pacific, which was so active. So, put it all together, okay? When we look out from the 25th of October to the 25th of November, the European model's making some sense to me here. And if you notice, it's this. And what is that doing to the Northwest? What's that doing to storm track in this area? And why are we drier here? I think the reason is the jet stream has still got an attack angle that's coming in like this and going out like that. It's not coming in like this and going out like that. Does that make sense? That's a subtle difference, but the entry point into the United States is everything. Now, in winter, I expect there to be a subtropical jet that forms. I don't think it's going to be a consistent, like everyday kind of feature. But once we get into winter, yes, it's just not there right now. So we can kind of divide the country. And again, we see drier here, we see drier there. And the question is that pattern going to be around for a while? I'm talking like for 4 or 5 months. Okay? So let's keep thinking this through. Temperature-wise, before I get into that longer range, this is where we've been. I showed you this on Wednesday. Very cold in the western states, multiple troughs of low pressure, and they're going to stay cool. The heat waves that have hit the Midwestern United States, just building these temperatures up. Yes, it's been drier. We've opened up harvest windows wide open, and the crop has dried down quickly with high temperatures, high evaporation. But it's going to get a bit more volatile as we go forward. Our frost threat over the next 7 days, this is what the National Weather Service, National Digital Forecast Database, which is a part of the National Weather Service, has put out. So you can see in the gray there where I think we have frost risk going forward. And this is what our high temperatures are going to do. So there's our warm sector opening up ahead of the system on Saturday. We're going to see a drop-off in temperatures. There we go. Drop-off in temperatures on Sunday. But just take note, this is not linked up to any sort of real Arctic air. Still cold in the northwest as the next low comes through. That pushes into the Rocky Mountains. That's where we're going to get some snow out of that. And we start to see more seasonal temperatures by next Tuesday in the Midwest, northern plains. Maybe a little cooler than average, while the east is still a bit warmer, so is the south. We then go out there to next Wednesday, Thursday. Ahead of each one of these lows that's going to come through, we're going to open this all back up to warmth again. So that's what I meant when I said we're going to go on a kind of a ride with these temperatures overall. The temperature kind of matrix, the 15-day temperature matrix, there's one consistent theme when you look over these 5-day swaths. If you're in the west, your chances of a full, long recovery of warm conditions is just not there. But the middle section of the country overall stays very mild, and we'll have to watch, late into week 2 if we drop off troughs into the east, cooling things down, which you can see there in the day 5 to 10 forecast. All right, that seems to be the pattern that we're in. Now, with all that, now I can get to this long range stuff. The Climate Prediction Center just released their new outlooks, and I want to show you their 1-month outlook for the month of November. It looks very similar to the European, doesn't it? We're drier south, we're drier southeast, and very wet where the storm track is going to be, where the jet's going to be. So we're going to divide the country too. Very mild south and possibly much more volatile temperatures to the north. But they also released their new 3-month outlook, and that goes November, December, January. And this is, as we've said many times over the last several months, this forecast for November, December, January is very La Nina looking. Okay? Better chances of cold air intrusions north, more mild to the south where it's dry. And this is what I've been thinking a lot about. Now, there has been a lot of evidence that the northwest into the northern Rockies is going to be active this winter. We see dryness here in the Sun Belt getting into the Cotton Belt, and I'm concerned, yes, but I'm wanting to investigate what it takes to make this versus this have a massive range in precipitation. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Cotton Belt, Great Lakes, that's the idea here. All right, so with that, I want to show you this. I went into the Cotton Belt and I said, let's make a time series of precipitation hitting all December, January, and Februaries, starting back at 1895. And I saw some very interesting things here. Look at this time period in the 40s and 50s. Now, we had major drought in Texas during that time. Okay, now that was mainly summer drought, but it was there. But notice how the volatility was small, and then lately the volatility's really opened back up. And therefore, we've had large swings year to year. Now, I put a trend line on this since 1980. I would not add much significance to this winter trend line that I've put here. So I just put it on there to look at it, but I want you to see, don't read much into that trend line right there. But thinking this through, I said, well, let's go out and let's go grab the wettest Cotton Belt winters. In other words, the kind of winters when you get into spring, we're not talking at all about drought in the Cotton Belt. And you're going, why are we doing this again? Because right now they're forecast dry. So when you go out and look at all of that, it says, hey, it's best if you're in the Cotton Belt to have an El Nino and to have the North Pacific in the opposite configuration to what Matt talked about yesterday. Bring in the cold here. And what this ends up doing is this contrast, this thermal contrast, deep in the atmosphere drives a subtropical jet. And so we have systems that are met up with the polar jet that dives, and they just curl and crank up right along the Gulf Coast, and then they run up the East Coast. But this is El Nino, and we do not have one of those right now. We are not in an El Nino mode. You want to look at our current ocean temperatures? Yes, we've had some cooling here and here lately, but still very warm in the North Pacific, and look at that La Nina going there. And that's where we currently stand. We have a negative Indian Ocean dipole. We still have quite a bit of warmth in the Caribbean, the Gulf, and in the North Atlantic. And so it's not that. That is why most forecasters are saying, I can't call for a wet cotton belt winter because it's just not lining up like it. So then I said, well, what about the Great Lakes precipitation? Because we can see since the 80s that there's been a pretty decent uptick in total precipitation, although very volatile, since the 80s. And I wanted to know, like, what would it take to make it wet there? It doesn't matter if there's an El Nino or La Nina. In fact, there's El Nino years, like, look at that monster. And we've got La Nina years in here as well. I mean, several La Nina years, but they all wash out. What it seems to be is if you're wanting really wet conditions in the Great Lakes, you've got to build up a lot of heat that stretches from here to there. And what this ends up doing is it ends up driving clippers over the top of this through the Canadian prairie, and then you get the lake effect snow out of it because it's cold. So you want to build a ridge that sits in this area, and you get the flow coming. Look, see this? And that's going to help drive cold, and it's going to run quickly up the East Coast around a ridge. So that's what would drive, the pattern to hit the Great Lakes. Now, back to that cotton belt. If it was drier down here, and I looked at all those years that it was really, look at all, these are all the winters that it was very dry south. Now, if we get this dryness here and dryness in the Sun Belt, what was the resulting pattern around the rest of the country? Well, that's the precipitation outlook. Have a look at this. Globally, we were in La Ninas with warm pockets across the Pacific. We had quite a bit of cooler water over here, which is part of the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, but it's not really shown up quite as clearly there. But La Nina is definitely a signal, and we just pointed out, we've got this right now. If that's the case, we tend to drive that colder air into the Great Lakes. And you have this warmth here, which sets up the contrast for those troughs that come diving. So what do you get? You get troughs, clippers, cold, it runs to the northeast. So what's interesting is in support of what Matt was talking about yesterday, with the way that this winter pattern is kind of giving us hints, is that based on current ocean temperatures, where did I have those? There we go. Based on the current ocean temperature pattern, what I just showed you is likely more favorable. Not a guarantee, but likely more favorable to see something, where was I? Like this. Now, just to be clear, you're seeing blues here and going, holy cow, it's going to be, the Arctic. No, I mean, look at my color bar. It's -3 to +3. Now, if that was -10, then I'd be like, we need to be prepared. But that seems to be a hint for this upcoming winter I think we can't ignore. Now, how robust is this La Nina? Because I just put a lot of weight on the La Nina being an important factor in the upcoming forecast. Well, look at this. The MJO is starting to show some movement, and it's working its way to phase 4, 5, 6. Now, that is a very common resting place for a La Nina during winter. And what happens is you get westerly wind bursts here, easterly wind bursts there, and you get rising motion. If we see a whole lot of MJO 4, 5, 6 this winter, then that pattern I just showed you will likely happen. But look at these trade winds. Holy smokes. Just put your line right in there between. These are strong easterly wind bursts. These are strong westerly wind bursts. This is as La Nina as you can get. What I want to know, and Matt mentioned this yesterday, and we've been talking about it for a while, is this La Nina going to peak early? Is it going to peak in December, not in January? I mean, that's going hard right now. Is it going to hit its maximum, maybe a degree and a half below normal, early? I want to know that because I think that's what the Climate Prediction Center is thinking. And that's why their January, February, March is supportive of the coldest air here. It's kind of a hybrid of what we just talked about. So it's not necessarily over the Great Lakes, but it seems to be more northern plains, Canadian prairie, and they're mild. The other important factor is the new NOAA outlook for the middle of winter has this. Extremely active delta to Ohio Valley to Midwest storm track after dumping snow in the Rockies. Now, I mentioned this on Wednesday. The drought situation that is here is, if you are east of the Rocky Mountains, the drought situation that's inside that circle is critical, not just for these folks, but for everybody around them come next spring. And we're going to make that narrative. We're going to talk through that. In the West, this would only happen if we fail to produce the subtropical jet. And I'm just going to say this. I think that the beginning of winter may favor this. I don't think that February and March do, though. And my reasoning behind that is a quick collapse of La Niña will start to build up the proper mid and upper level atmospheric temperature gradients to possibly drive the subtropical jet. And all of this, my entire narrative, is just around what this map looks like by April 1st. And we got to see. That's it. That's where we're heading in all of this. So that, again, the new NOAA update. Now, let's talk about South America and wrap this up because I want to do a little model comparison for you here. This starts back on the 15th and goes through the 16th and 17th. And we're just looking for satellite estimated rainfall. Okay. When I think about the new upcoming model forecast, they continue to do the same thing. That's the next 7 days from the European. There's the next 7 days from the GFS. Major precipitation differences. And they just keep going. If we go out there, day 8 through 14, let's take out day 14 here. Actually, they don't. They actually agree day 8 through 14. I'm sorry. And they're trying to pull in some dryness here. And that dryness needs to be monitored very carefully. Now, there is one thing. The European is much wetter in Argentina with this pattern. I think it's partly associated with the very negative Antarctic oscillation we're dealing with right now, driving systems into this side of the planet. But, overall, if we just look at the next 2 weeks, there are differences, but there's some consistency with the dryness here. And that's important. I think that in this particular case, the ECMWF caved to the GFS solution it's had all along. So that makes me wonder about this. Let's get that off there. That makes me wonder about that. That's the forecast from October 20 to November 20. And the GFS is still very dry here. And the European has also backed off a bit. Much more normal in temperature or precipitation, but it was super wet. Do you remember me showing you those forecasts? And I think we have a story evolving here. Now, later on today, we will get the new, where do I get this website? We will get the new update on soybean planting. It's going to come out late this afternoon. But I think we have to watch if the newest update, which again will be this one for the 17th, is now below the 5-year average. That means they rapidly planted. There's going to be some early crop failure that needs to be replanted. And then are we doing this based on that current forecast? If you'd have asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd be like, no, we're going to be here or here. It's going to go fast. But my ideas have had to change because of some of the newest model evidence. And by the way, that model kind of disagreement we've been dealing with is still out there in the longer range. So, for example, this is the December, January, February European solution, which it's saying, no, there's going to be plenty of rain throughout the Cerrado, getting up, Mato Grosso, Rondonia, Para, these areas, plenty of rain, and dry in Rio Grande do Sul, dry in Argentina and Uruguay. But the new update from the NMME, okay, here's just kind of the matrix of the models and then the time periods. Look at December, January, February. The new NME is a bit drier. Now, it's not. This doesn't mean drought. It's just a bit drier overall with the precipitation rates. So there's a story evolving here that we need to pay attention to. And I think my preseason thinking about Brazil just getting what it needs, I think I need to back off on that a little bit. I don't know how much. I'm waiting to see more of these planting updates. But I think there's a story in South America that we're going to have to build on. So in the coming weeks, we are going to be hammering down on the Western United States precipitation pattern because of what I think it could do to set up the U.S. And we will then watch very carefully what's going on in South America and around the rest of the world. But I hope you enjoyed Matt's discussion yesterday. Fantastic stuff. And Andrew's going to be very busy talking about the severe weather. And again, I just want to make one more point. Watch out tomorrow in this area. Just please be aware, have multiple modes of accessing radar. The weather.gov is great, and just understanding where the severe risk has been because we've not had much rainfall in this area for 2 months. So to see the revival of it, it's just something we got to keep an eye out on. Okay. All right. That's all we got for you this week. Take care, everybody. We'll talk next Monday.